Hello, teachers. This week will be on the family, about Abraham and Lot. And the life point is that family members can work out differences. Bible Studies for Life wants to teach the children that God's plan is for each person to make a positive contribution to her family. Men and women have different but complementary roles in the family. So we won't get into the details of this, but this seems to be focusing on conflict resolution or loving one another, being humble in that way. And the passage for this week is Genesis chapter 13. And so, in Genesis chapter 13, Abraham goes from Egypt to the Negev, and then he goes to Bethel and Ai, where he had formerly been. So that's the place where he had built the altar in Genesis chapter 12. In Genesis chapter 12, God calls Abram from his homeland to go to the land he will show him. And Abram arrives in the land of Canaan. He takes his nephew Lot with him. And then he moves to Egypt during the time of a famine. And now in chapter 13, he's back in Canaan from Egypt. And by this point, Lot and Abram were blessed and they were wealthy. They had a lot of flocks and herds. They had their own separate possessions, and they had so much that the land could not support them as long as they were together. So they were having issues, and Abram is the first to initiate a solution. And Abram, being the older, by this time he's over 75 years old, he defers to his nephew. And he says, let's not have quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we're relatives. And so he gives Lot the choice to make. If you choose one way, I'll go the other way, and I'll let you make the first choice. And so Lot chooses the fertile land and eventually ends up in Sodom, but Abram chose the promised land. And that's how he resolves this conflict. But obviously the main focus of this passage is not conflict resolution, but it continues to point to Abram's faith. In chapter 12, he goes when God calls him to go, and he returns when the famine is over. And even when there was a choice to be made, he allows Lot to make the obvious fertile choice, while Abram chooses the one that was promised to him. God speaks to him again. Look from the place where you are, north, south, east, and west, for I will give you and your offspring forever the land that you see. And this is a covenant between God and Abram. And Abram makes another altar to the Lord. So every time Abram receives a promise from God, he built an altar in remembrance of it. And that's a good practice to do. If we ever experience God working or an answered prayer, it's good to have a marker, a physical marker, a journal entry to help us remember the promise of God so that we don't forget and we continue to have faith in Him.